the Office of Rail and Road, we are the independent monitor of National Highways. National Highways manages the strategic road network, so that is the motorways and major A roads in England. It was formed in 2015 as part of the Infrastructure Act, which set us up as their independent monitor. So that means that we hold them to account for delivery of the RIS, which is the government's 5-yearly road investment strategy, and we're currently in RIS 2. I'm sure this is not news to everyone else. And we also hold them to account for the conditions of their license. Alongside ourselves and National Highways, the Infrastructure Act set up Transport Focus to be the voice of the user, and they do research into user priorities and what users want from the network. So that's sort of the scene setting, if you like, for the context. So this is our report on the end of the second year of this road period, which started in 2020. The report runs until March, the end of March this year, and covers sort of that financial year. It's been a challenging year for everyone as we sort of come out of the end of the pandemic. Traffic makeup has changed slightly. I don't think the peaks that we used to see in that we see at the beginning and the end of the days, people travelling to and from work, are quite as sharp as they were, quite as intense as they were. But we're seeing different makeup of traffic on the network as well, with a bit more freight, a bit more light goods vehicles than perhaps domestic cars and so on the network sort of more generally, and the weekends tend to be a bit busier. Hasn't achieved the same impact that we've seen on other modes of travel like rail, so it's been quite a strong recovery for road traffic sort of more generally. And with that, setting that scene, I'm going to hand over to Harry Garnham, who is our head of roads performance. Harry, over to you.
Thanks, Ferris. Yeah, so welcome everyone. Thanks for giving us your time this morning, or this afternoon, apologies, greatly appreciated. So I'll take you through the 4 key messages from our annual assessment and a little bit of an overview of where we are in terms of our forward look. So moving on into the assessment itself then, the first key message is around safety. And it probably sort of goes without saying, but safety remains National Highways' main priority, and we've certainly seen evidence of that throughout the year. In terms of where it's working towards in terms of the second road period and 2025 commitments, it's working towards where it needs to be. Obviously, we've had a different year in terms of traffic levels, as Ferris sort of summarised. We have seen a rise in terms of forecasts for killed and seriously injured on the network. Clearly, that's in relation to the post-pandemic, pre-pandemic traffic levels that we've seen. And as traffic levels do return to normal, it's really important that National Highways continues to focus on its downward trajectory. And obviously, we remain focused in terms of the zero harm ambition by 2040. Another key aspect around our safety is National Highways' ongoing progress around smart motorway. Obviously, it remains a very sensitive area in terms of the media, and a key area in terms both the delivery of the enhancements aspect, but also the on-road management. And there is the safety-focused Smart Motorway Action Plan with 18+4 actions. And across the year, we've seen National Highways progress well against the delivery in that, with a further 6 actions delivered. And generally speaking, it's on track. The slight exception there that we focus on in the key messages around Action 3, the faster response to traffic officers, and in particular, the milestone there around a faster response on sections of all-lane running smart motorway where there's an emergency area greater than a mile apart. And that remains above the 10-minute target at the time of us writing the annual assessment. So there is more to do, which we will be monitoring very closely. And when we receive the 2021's KSI data from the department in the autumn, we will be writing for the first time a specific safety report, which not only concludes against the performance data and the KPI around killed and seriously injured, but will also be it'll also be a wider report looking at the safety of smart motorways and the work that we've been asked to do by the department. Just move on, Hayden, to the next key message, which is around asset management. And we've seen some progress across the year in the company's asset management maturity. Indeed, it updated its asset management policy in May, which is a big positive. But we do still need to see more evidence that it's able to execute its asset management policy and deliver it on the ground. And specifically, we've been focused across the year on its renewals work, and that the renewals work is being delivered in line with the programme the company set for itself at the start of the year, so that where it has decided that there are priority assets, we are seeing evidence that those have been treated. Where there has been change, we're in a real world here, and the change is inevitable. Where there is change, we're also looking for reporting and evidence that explains the change and why certain things have had to move or indeed been brought forward into the programme. And ultimately, that is a demonstration of compliance with its own asset management policy. Fundamentally, obviously, we are interested in the, if you like, the tactical element of the reporting, but the bigger picture around this is the efficient use of funds, so that we are getting those longer term, those whole life asset management road user benefits across not just this road period, but thinking about the next one as well. If you go on to the next slide for me, Hayden, around environmental performance. So we've seen some varied performance aspects in the environment space. So across the year, we've seen some good performance around corporate carbon, air quality and noise, and indeed, particularly on carbon emissions, we're up to around a reduction of around 59% reported, and that's against a target of 75% for the end of the road period in 2025. So there has been some good progress across these first couple of years of the road period, but it's not to say it's a blanket picture. So on biodiversity, we do have concerns that there isn't a robust plan in place that will have the company achieving no net loss by 2025. So we are looking for the company to produce something, a plan that does give us that real confidence, and that it will ultimately achieve its key performance indicator. We've in tandem to the annual assessment, we've also published a consultancy piece around biodiversity and what's going on in that subject area. Next slide, please, Hayden. Okay, so the fourth key message is around enhancements or major projects, if you like, and it's been fairly well reported, I guess, that a number of the most significant enhancements have had issues across the year. However, it's very noteworthy that National Highways has met its in-year delivery commitment. That's both for starting works and opening for traffic. So we've seen 4 schemes actually start work on the network and 7, open to traffic and realise their benefits, which is obviously very positive. That's not the end of the journey, unfortunately. So the programme has risks attached to it. Unsurprisingly, a lot of them revolve around some of the more complex enhancements and their planning needs, and we're going to need to see a continued focus on meeting those planning requirements and ensuring that where things have to go for judgment around DCOs, they have a very robust case for the remainder of the road period. And in doing so, of course, that maximises confidence that commitments will be met to time, to budget, and be able to offer the wider efficiency benefits, which, as we probably all know, are more marked in RP2 than they were in the first road period. So those are the 4 key messages, and I'll just a couple of key points that we're looking ahead to. Clearly, what I've discussed here will be a main focus, but there are a couple of other noteworthy points. So, customer or the road user, that is perhaps conspicuous by its absence in terms of our key messages, and you may well ask yourselves or ask me, why is that? So because of the pandemic and the way in which the interviews are conducted, SRUS, the Strategic Road Users Survey that gathers the data that feeds the metric, has been paused. As we now are moving out, it's resuming in an online format, but it was felt and agreed across National Highways, the department and ORR that it needed that longer time series of data for it to be able to be suitably robust. So it has been paused again for 22-23. We are very much committed and wanting it to resume, as I believe everyone is, wanting it to resume in 23-24 and working with all parties to try and ensure that absolutely happens. The other thing that I've touched on perhaps as a thread throughout most of the key messages actually is the financial picture. And obviously we're all very aware of the wider financial issues that are going on. So inflation being perhaps the main headline grabber. But as we move closer to the end of the road period, we're also starting to focus more on National Highways efficiency collection and making sure that it's able to mitigate some of those risks that it's experiencing around the wider finance picture, and how it manages those through its central risk reserve, and ultimately how it's able to deliver both the programme and also its wider KPIs. So we see that as being quite a critical area across 22-23, and one we imagine that we'll be spending a lot of time looking into. Those are the 2 main additional points on top of the 4 key messages I just want to draw out. And that's the quick run through of the annual assessment. Obviously, if you'd like to read any more in detail, it's published online on our website. Louise, I believe you're taking on the next.
Yeah, thanks, Harry. Okay, so that is a quick run through, as Harry said, of our key messages for our annual assessment and a couple of points looking ahead to the future. Does anybody have any questions? You're more than welcome to type them in the chat, or if you've got something you want to ask directly, then please do pop up a hand. Phil.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Hi there. Phil Carey, Transport Focus. As Harry's indicated, SRUS is clearly, in principle, a really important part of assessing overall performance of national highways. We had the disruption during the worst of the COVID period, but just to be clear, we are very much back in business with SRUS. There still isn't a target in place through, sort of a understandably cautious approach by the Department, National Highways and ORR. But we've very much producing SRUS data. Indeed, just today we've published the annual report on SRUS for the first post-lockdown year, i.e. April 21 to March 22. I'm going to have another go at trying to sort of paste a link into the chat box, but otherwise I might have to sort of provide it separately to Harry and Hayden for distribution to those present. But do please have a look at that, because it shows what valuable evidence is also now coming out of the new SRUS. Thanks.
Thanks, Phil. That's really helpful and interesting, I think, and really supplements the point that we were just talking about getting SRUS fully back on track by 2023-24. I'm going to go to David.
Thanks, David Metz, University College London. I mean, generally, an industry regulator of the kind you are will have quite a focus on the benefits to consumers of investments. But I don't see this in the work you're doing. I'm particularly concerned that a number of smart motorway schemes in particular have fallen very well short of aspiration when the outcome has been evaluated. The aspiration when the investment was made. So in the case, for example, of the smart motorway on the M1 junctions 10 to 13, the 5-year outturn benefit cost ratio recalculated was negative because the traffic flowed more freely, more slowly 5 years after opening than before. So the outturn was detrimental to consumers, but this isn't something you really are looking at. And my question is, shouldn't you be doing this? Shouldn't you be, shouldn't you have the user interest very much in mind in your analysis?
Yeah, that's a good question. Thanks, David. So in terms of our role, we monitor the delivery of the roads investment strategy, and that is set by government, and obviously a key part of that is road user and road user benefits. In terms of our role, we aren't technically the regulator of national highways, we are its monitor, and we monitor the delivery of that through its KPIs. In terms then of smart motorway, and obviously aware of the project you mentioned specifically, we are doing a fair bit of work in terms of obviously monitoring the delivery of the capital enhancements themselves, but also looking at the action plan, which is very much safety focused for the road user. And then the final bit of that is the work we're just kicking off around supporting the Transport Select Committee in terms of their recommendations. So you may be aware they made 6 recommendations. Now ultimately they very much support the road user and the quality of output realised. So I think that is very much our role, and we aren't in a space of being able to design the RIS. We monitor what's in it and the delivery of it.
Thanks, Harry. Do you want to follow up, David? You've still got a hand up.
Sorry, didn't take my hand down, but since you ask. I mean, my own analysis of what's going on with smart motorway schemes is that there's a lot more local users compared with the long distance users where the real economic benefit is supposed to derive. And this increase in local use, I think, is facilitated by the widespread use of sat-nav devices. So you get junction hopping, you hop onto a section of the motorway for your home to work trip, for example, and you're using capacity that was intended for long distance users. And I think this is probably a general phenomenon because the strategic road network comes under the greatest stress in or near built up areas where you've got this mixture of local and long distance traffic. Remote from built up areas, I mean, mostly it flows fairly freely. So I think we do need to look much harder at the nature of the benefits to road users to see whether continued investment in enhancement is really justified. Now, whether it's the work of the OR or not, I'm not sure, but it should be someone's job to do this. It's not, National Highways, because they're a main player. It's not something the department seems open to. It could be the OR if you could see your way to enlarge your brief a bit, but if not, who? But it is work that I think needs to be done.
Yeah, indeed, David. And perhaps just to your point there about different user groups using smart motorways and using the network in general is very much a valid one. And perhaps I should have also added, National Highways has done a fair bit of public-facing educational campaigns, so their Go Left campaign, and we're looking to understand what it plans to do further. Indeed, the benefits or the data that it's managed to glean from that Go Left campaign. So I think there's an educational facet to this in terms of making sure that if people do choose to use the smart motorway network, they have that knowledge of how it works and the various new signs and signals that they will see. Phil, did you just want to say something?
I might as well just seize the opportunity if you don't mind. David, thank you very much for highlighting the importance of user benefits. And as Transport Focus is part of the partnership with government with a specific role to represent the interests of users of the SRN. I better just say a couple of things. As far as smart motorways are concerned, we're building up sufficient data within SRUS such that I think within the coming year we will start to be able to single out the user experience and satisfaction with some of the main smart motorway stretches, which I think will be a valuable step forward. But in terms of more broadly assessing impacts on the user, Transport Focus have been a very active part of formulating the RIS2 performance specification in the first place, and we're clear and confident that there's an important user dimension to many of the other metrics on which ORR are reporting the information, obviously the delay performance. So even without SRUS being in the formal assessment, I think there is a good focus on the user dimension to National Highways performance.
Yeah, and Sharon's rightly reminded me in the chat, reminded us all, but there is also the point there around government's decision to pause projects, smart motorway projects in construction whilst more safety data comes online, and that then links to Sharon's point in the chat around the post-opening project evaluations, so both the 1 and 5 year, which should give us a better picture of, you know, both road user adoption, but also that whether or not the business cases are being realised or not. Thanks for that, David. Louise, or anyone else?
Anybody else want to ask a question? Billy.
Thanks very much. Harry, you mentioned that in delivering enhancements to the network, planning issues represent an ongoing risk to delivery, particularly where schemes are required to go through the development consent order process. I just wondered if you could expand a little bit on what you think those issues are and what National Highways could be doing to mitigate some of those issues. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So they're not issues that National Highways itself isn't aware of. Where there is a more complex portfolio, which is what we have in RP2 compared to the first road period, there is a need for more in-depth stakeholder engagement, and that evidence has been key to a number of DCO decisions, and also key to the judicial review period as and when things have gone to that point. And we obviously have seen, headline obviously being the LTC, but things get moved in the programme as a result of concerns over planning conditions. So, you know, it's not a new risk, but it does continue. We do have an enhancements programme that is quite, you know, back end loaded in terms of start of works, and we also have a number of highly complex projects still to start. So it's a kind of, you know, double effect there, more of them, less time, and also the complexity. I mean, the good news, of course, is we are starting in this financial year 22-23, we have started to see some movement. We've seen several DCOs approved by the Secretary of State, and 3 more pass through the judicial challenge period, where they may have gone to judicial review. So I think we're seeing an improvement there. But clearly, you know, until we've got all of those schemes through the critical time period in terms of getting them onto the network and starting works, we want to keep behind that.
Thank you, Harry. That's really helpful. I'll just add to that it's not perhaps just an issue that's unique to National Highways either. I think there's some issues there that go back to the Planning Act 2008 and the infrastructure planning regime. So there's some sort of common issues there that I think government are looking at the moment too. Thank you.
Thanks, Billy. Has anybody else got a question, anything that you wanted to ask? As a reminder for those of you who came in late, we ran through our 4 key messages, which are around safety, asset management, environmental performance, and enhancements. So is there anything in any of those areas anyone you particularly wanted to ask about? Okay. Well, we will, Hayden, if you want to go on to the next slide. We have a team email box, so if you have any questions that occur to you afterwards, particularly any technical questions that might require a bit more thought or elaboration that you wanted to put to us, please send it through to our Highways Monitor email address, which is in the chat and also in the slide there. If there's, there'll also be some social media going out this afternoon, and as Hayden said, we will be putting this seminar on our YouTube channel as well. So if there is nothing else that anybody wanted to ask about, I'm going to say thank you to our roads panel, thank you to Ferris, to Harry, to Hayden, and thank you all for coming. I hope you found it useful and have a good afternoon.